So Terrence will, when you're giving an explanation, you have to slow it down and then pause and then look at the person's eye, and you can tell from their body language, are they understanding? Are they following? Sometimes you can wait. Like, what you bring up a great point. If you're in the digital behind a keyboard, you're going to be more adversarial than if you were to have a conversation in person. This is even known if you have ever gone to if you've ever gone to podcasting conferences or seen any of these people in real life. People who are controversial, you'll see their enemies go up to them in person and say, "Oh, I can't believe it's you." We'll just say Peterson, "I can't believe it's you, Jordan. That's so cool." And then they'll shake hands, take a photo. It's because it melts away when you're in person. Very few, extremely few people are aggressive in person. Extremely few. And we're just removing that. And then we think, because we interact with the world in a digital manner with Twitter in this case, that everyone's like that, and then we start to mistrust. So John Vervaeke of the meaning crisis guy that I keep bringing up, he has many in-person sessions where he talks to people, and he prioritizes that over than just promulgating in digital form on YouTube in lectures.
We've talked about him so much today. I want to make sure, in addition to having Curt's channel link down below, let's have a direct link to like his most recent Vervaeke episode. I think that'd be really cool. I know I'm going to check that out when I'm done. This guy sounds really cool.
Peterson said that what you have to watch out for charismatic individuals is if you state 100 statements and you're paying attention, because you can't help but do so unconsciously, that you'll notice the crowd is roused by 3 or 4 of them. And then you will start to move toward that, and you'll say 100 other statements, and then the crowd will be ignited by 5 of those statements, and you start moving toward where the crowd is. And he has documented that in his work, and I think he's falling prey to that, at least on Twitter.
Yeah.
And also, right. I was going to say could be. So here's something else about Terrence Howard. Terrence Howard is stating so many statements, making so many assertions, that it's difficult, firstly, to follow. And secondly, some of them are going to be correct because it's so hard for you to make 300 statements and not have 20 of them
correct
land in the correct vicinity.
Yep.
So this is what I was saying to Lee Cronin when I did an analysis of Terrence Howard's Joe Rogan Experience episode, the first one.
That was really good, by the way. I saw
Thanks.
that one.
And I wanted to make sure that it wasn't in a despising manner or denigrating manner toward Terrence. I wanted to make sure let's just be level-headed. Let's not be Neil deGrasse Tyson, even though Neil deGrasse Tyson's comments on that were extremely diplomatic. He was. I was surprised about that.
He was.
So Terrence will, when you're giving an explanation, you have to slow it down and then pause and then look at the person's eye, and you can tell from their body language, are they understanding? Are they following? Sometimes you can wait, like you interjected and said, "I'm not following about infinity. Why can't you just line up so-and-so and so?" Okay, that's fantastic. Then you go back and you re-explain, and then you re-explain. You don't jump to more and more new topics that supposedly build off of the previous topics. You lose people. You're supposed to slow it down, reference previous points, bring it back. So Terrence was not doing that. And I think Eric said, "Terrence, you're not a great teacher."
Yeah,
Stop
he said
teaching.
that 1,000,000 times. Yeah. He kept saying, "Please, stop. You're teaching again." He's like, "I'm not trying to." He's like, "You're teaching." And I understood it, because he's saying, we had mentioned this earlier in the podcast, but he's saying, like, you're teaching where you've already taken 3 leaps. So now you're teaching something that already is 3 layers wrong. So even if you're getting this next idea in theory somewhat right, if you don't have the basis of it right, you're in the wrong zip code.
And another phenomenon is that people will use in the space of people who develop their own bespoke theory of everything. We haven't even said the word theory of everything.
We haven't.
Yeah. So just for people who have no idea what that is, in physics, the term theory of everything means we have 2 grand theories. One is called quantum mechanics, technically quantum field theory. And then we have another one called general relativity, aka gravity. or AKA Einstein's theory. Now, we don't have a single individual for this one because it was built up with tens of people interacting over decades, where Einstein was the genius who came up with general relativity. Now, both of these describe our universe in different domains. They seem to have to overlap, especially with black holes and the Big Bang, because black holes have something to do with gravity and something to do with the small, because the singularity is extremely, well, it's as small as one can be. Plus, then there's something called Hawking radiation, which has to do with particles. So anytime you're dealing with fundamental subatomic particles, it's quantum field theory. So that's a place where you have to combine them. We don't know what happens before the Big Bang. That's because we don't have a theory of everything. A theory of everything is how do you combine both of these? Okay, so that's that. That's the holy grail of physics. It's been the holy grail since the 50s or so.
Yep.
String theory is a contender of a theory of everything. Geometric unity is also a contender, so that's Eric Weinstein's. And Peter Voigt has his own theory, and Garrett Lisi has his own theory, and there's a variety of other theories. Lee Smolin has his own theory called loop quantum gravity, and so on. Then you have people who have not studied physics much because they feel like if you study physics, if you go to university, you become indoctrinated, you become entrenched. So let me not do that, but let me use some of the terminology that other scientists have developed. For instance, supersymmetry, that I saw Terrence say.
Right.
And it was hilarious because he said, yeah, this is supersymmetric. And I'm thinking, you have supercharges and you have an algebra? And then he's like, no, it's just an extremely symmetric object. And then I thought the same thing Eric thought. It's like, supersymmetry doesn't mean just extremely symmetric. It means something specific. But what happens is people who are developing their own toe, they tend to glom onto extremely technical sounding words because the crowd presumes what it can't see to the bottom of must be deep. So that's a hidden motivation. I'm constantly looking for unconscious motivations of myself. And so I can see it in others. You have to be careful of not using jargon to spice up your theory to bring more credence to it. Because the person who doesn't understand will think you know what you're talking about. But then the person who does understand would say, you're absolutely ridiculous and I'm going to dismiss you.
I like that you brought this up. This is actually why, though, my current opinion is not that Terrence Howard is, say, like a charlatan grifter type. I don't think that's what it is. It doesn't mean that some of the things he's saying and their ability to be easily disproven in many cases doesn't point out that maybe he's in over his skis. The reason I'm saying that is because I think it has to do with how his brain works. And let me explain this. So people talk about being left brain or right brain. I always forget which is which, but think about it to oversimplify. Creative.
Left is analytical.
Okay, so creative or logical. So the creative is going to be right side, I guess.
Creative, yes, correct.
And the left is going to be logical.
There is a neuropsychological basis to it, so it's not just a...
Right, yeah, it's real.
Not just
it's real.
Waving. So
I am naturally a creative brain, so that'd be right side, right? I do, and I don't want to...
If you're right-handed.
I don't want to make myself sound like more talented or important or anything like that. I'm just using an example of how I process things. So when I see things, I have an artistic, emotional reaction naturally. I have trained myself throughout my life, though, to access my left brain. And I have a pretty strong left brain. So when something happens or I see something for the first time, I will usually kind of let out the emotion to myself, let it calm down, and then pull it back to even a little bit by trying to be logical about the situation to, kind of balance things out. What I have come to realize is that most people, in doing a job like this, I talk with a lot of different people from a lot of different walks of life, both on camera and off. Most people aren't like that. I've met a couple people who are like me like that, but not many. And I don't believe Terrence is one of those people. I think Terrence is one of those pure right brain people. And I'm going to have to explain this, because just bear with me here. But when I was listening to the Weinstein Howard podcast, maybe like 15, 20 minutes in, 10 minutes in, something like that, it clicked for me. And I realized what Terrence is like. he said it was something simple. He was saying a line, and he's like, that would mean that something comes from nothing, no thing. And he was breaking down the word artistically, and I said, Kanye West. That's how Kanye West's that's how his brain works. That's how my brain will work too. I constantly look at things and I'm like picking them apart and I'm going layers and layers deeper on it, but I'll pull myself back and I'll be like, wait a minute, we're running with something there that's not there. So, for example, you could do what Terrence just did there with the word history, which, if I believe, we've looked it up before, like it doesn't come from his story, right? That's not what the etymology of it is. But you could take things too far with that type of logic and apply things to words that really aren't there because it worked for other words. And so when I started to listen to Terrence more, I was like, he's exactly like Kanye in that he is so artistic and he's operating 10 miles ahead of everyone else in that lane that he will then tie that into things where it does make sense and not be able to separate the difference between all those other things where it doesn't make sense. And on top of that, he probably is, as a creative and a famous person, slightly narcissistic. Obviously, Kanye is very narcissistic, that, he can't really reel himself back in some ways. So I don't think it was a matter of like Terrence is trying to promulgate a bunch of ideas or propagate a bunch of ideas that don't make sense because, he's trying to make money or get attention off of it.
I don't think it's that at all.
I think it's because his brain genuinely works that way, and he doesn't realize that like the brilliance of the artistic creativity that he has, which puts him on a very high IQ playing field. And clearly he has some natural scientific abilities too that I think also increase that IQ playing field. He is overestimating though what this part of the IQ can do to that part of the IQ. And he thinks that IQ is up here with this one, and it's still not quite there because that's not what his life's work's been, and that's not how his brain naturally works. Thank you for watching the video, guys. If you haven't already subscribed, please smash that subscribe button and check out this clip's full podcast episode by clicking here or in the description below.